everyone. I'm so happy to be here today. Before we kick it off, I just want you all to do something for me. And I see everyone's not on video, so I think it should be easy, but just wave your hands or do 5 jumping jacks, but like, let's get excited. Most of us have probably worked all day or studied all day or taken care of friends and family and pets and yourself. So let's get excited. Let's get ready. And hopefully we'll have a really great hour of fun and questions and learning. Awesome. So again, if you want to turn on your camera, feel free, but if not, no big deal. I'm also in my pajamas. That's just the way COVID life has become. If you want to put questions in the chat, feel free. We'll talk about them after. If you want to just unmute and ask, that's great too. Whatever works for you. How's that sound? Good? Thumbs up.
And I've just enabled video. It was disabled. So if folks do want to turn their video on, they're able to do that. And then based on Alyssa's instructions, I will now allow folks to unmute themselves. So we're living in the danger zone now.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. I love it. We're getting excited. We're getting excited. Perfect. Awesome. So before we really kick off the content, I want to get to know you all and make sure I'm tailoring this conversation the right way. So I want to kick it off just to understand you all. So I know Zoom's hard. I want us to get to know each other a little bit. So if we could use like the reactions for this question, that would be great. So I'd love to know what your level of experience with software development is. So if you're already a mobile dev, you can hit like the clap emoji. If you already do a different type of software development, hit the thumbs up emoji. If you're just getting started with software development, put the heart. I think you're going to like it. You're in the right place. If you're learning about coding and trying to figure out if it's right for you, do the little party or ta-da emoji. And then if there's something else, raise your hand. Would love to hear what that is. Oh, awesome. I love seeing all these emojis, lots of hearts, lots of claps, some ta-das. Awesome. Awesome. Great. So we have a great mix, and I hope this conversation will be tailored towards a lot of this. And then my next question, so same thing, what are you hoping to get out of today's session? Again, I just want to make sure I tailor the talk to you and your interests. So if you want to learn more about the transition process to mobile development, use the clap emoji. If you're just really interested in learning more about mobile software development concepts as a whole, the thumbs up emoji. If you want to learn more about coding overall, the heart emoji, and then meet new people, the party emoji. Okay, I see thumbs up, hearts, claps, more thumbs up. Awesome. Party emoji. Awesome. So I think I have everything here covered in my talk, but I'm happy to stop and answer questions and then go over more at the end of the session as well. Oh, I didn't realize I didn't change the slide. So my bad. So who am I? My name is Alyssa Romeo. I'm clearly using 2 screens right now with notes, so I apologize for that. But I'm a master software engineer at Capital One. Right now, I lead an iOS and an Android team. And I thought, what's the best way to get to know me rather than through what I've done through the pandemic? And as you can tell, it hasn't been much besides hiking and going to my first ever farm. So me in a nutshell, like doing outdoor things and really like technology, but also some of my hobbies are not technology related. And then Joni stole my thunder, but if you can't tell from my accent already, I'm from Chicago, one of the best cities, I think, in the world, but not as great as some of the Virginia cities. So please don't kick me off of this Zoom stage. I'm so excited you have me here. So let's kick it off. Why should you care about mobile? So I want everyone to stop and think. What do you use your mobile device for? How often do you leave it at home? How often is it in a different room than the one that you're in? How many people have their phones next to them right now? Like I have both my phones next to me literally right now. Mobile devices have become commonplace for gathering information quickly entertaining us on the go, and helping us stay connected to each other. Really, for those reasons, mobile keeps growing, and it keeps growing fast, both in terms of user base, but also in terms of jobs. So mobile app usage is growing faster than website usage. There are 3.4 billion smartphone users globally, and that number is expected to increase by an additional 1 billion new smartphone users by 2025. That's a lot of phones. That's a lot of users. That's a lot of impact you can have. If you're interested, check out Google's Next Billion Users, and they really talk about some interesting research about how these next 1 billion smartphone users will have some different perspectives as they become more acquainted with smartphones. And of course, 50% of global website traffic is due to mobile devices, and 90% of a user's time on their mobile device is spent with an app. So I want you to think again for a second. How do you spend time on your device? Have you thought about it? Great. Because this is going to lead us to our first discussion question. I want to try to make this as interactive as possible. I know, again, Zoom is hard, but would love for us to talk about as a group what your favorite mobile experience is. And I differentiated experience from app specifically, because sometimes you might have a really bad app, but a really great experience, or maybe you have a really great app, but an excellent experience. So if folks want to take themselves off mute and just introduce yourself and shout it out, that would be great. Who wants to be our first person? I promise it gets easier.
There's some in the chat. It looks like someone said AR. That's pretty cool.
You mean speak up?
Oh yes, that would be great.
My favorite is VR, AR, virtual reality, augmented reality. That's like
Awesome.
so immersive.
What's your favorite, like what have you used VR and AR with?
So for example, I created an app for our DevFest where we have several classrooms, and it would put up a large banner towards the classroom numbers in an AR space. And I created a fun, I wouldn't say game, but an app where I combined physical simulation, so you can toss a ball into a Jenga tower, basically, and like play around stuff. It's fun.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like so much fun. What's the app you built that you can throw stuff at Jenga? That sounds awesome.
It's unfortunately Android only right now, and it's AR physics experiment. I will post the Google Play link.
Awesome. That is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing. That's great. Thank you. Who else has oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to advertise or anything what I'm doing.
Oh, no worries.
I just had to shout out.
No, that's awesome. That's such a cool thing. I love Jenga. So very cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Who else? Who else has a favorite mobile experience? Oh, I love it. Leslie posts when you conquer the code. I love it when you solve a difficult problem, hit the play button and your prototype comes to life the way it's supposed to. Yes, I love that too. Oh my gosh, I know. I totally agree with that. That the moment everything works and you're like, yes, I did it. I totally agree. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Leslie. Anybody else want to share? Awesome. I see some other ones in the chat. Marion says Apple Pay. Oh, definitely. Makes transactions super convenient. Totally agree. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And Randall, adding page transitions. Definitely. Oh, and then learning mobile development and design and prototyping in Figma. Oh, I just learned how to prototype in Figma the other day. Very cool, Nikki. Thanks for sharing. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. And it kind of kicks us off to transitioning into mobile development as a career. So mobile app developers are ranked as one of the best jobs in America. It's also expected to grow by 19% in the next 10 years. So think about that. It's clearly very relevant in the marketplace. In the next part of the talk, I'm going to go over how can you get there. And I want to preface this with, this is my story and it's very unique to me. So it won't be the same for everyone. There's a billion ways to get there, but this is kind of the process and the learning journey that I went through. So transitioning into mobile development is a process. In undergrad, I was really interested in embedded systems and hardware. So I focused a lot there. And if you told me I had to write a driver for any Raspberry Pi device or like a USB, like that would be great. That's all I wanted to do. So clearly I went into data engineering, couldn't be pretty different. And then after school, I went to data engineering where I helped build a new modern big data infrastructure. Really interesting, but wasn't my thing. So I moved into full stack software engineering where, again, I did a lot of things. I did back-end API development, full front-end development, automated testing. What else did I do? Infrastructure, AWS cloud services. I would do 12, 13, 14 releases a day. It was super cool, a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but then I got to a point in my career where I felt like I did everything from a full stack perspective, and the opportunity came in to switch to mobile. So I got my grounding in iOS development, where I learned a lot more and really stretched myself into this new role. And this is what I'm going to kind of focus on. And now I call myself a mobile engineer because I have a little bit of Android experience, but I'm going to say it's only a little bit of experience. But the process is the same. So transitioning into mobile development is a process. And it kind of all starts with that idea and that risk and that passion and excitement for a new opportunity. So I knew I wanted to start something new, and that's kind of where it started. I also got a little bit of FOMO. All of my friends were talking about switching over to iOS development, and I thought, okay, I also have to do that. So once you decide you want to do something new and you want to go into mobile, there's kind of this process where you have to go through for learning, right? And I thought moving from one software development stack to a mobile stack was going to be quite simple and straightforward. But I quickly learned that wasn't necessarily the case. There's a lot to deal with mobile that's very unique to mobile. So there's different programming languages, of course, but also you're handling storage differently. You're handling memory differently. You're handling hardware differently. So there's a lot of like really intricate and nuanced components that come along with mobile development. So I'm going to save you all the time that you need to learn these online concepts and boil them down into what I call Alyssa's cheat sheet to mobile development concepts. And this is kind of the things that stuck out to me as like, oh, this was interesting. This wasn't how I did this before on web. So the first one I'm going to start off with is probably pretty straightforward. And this has to deal with devices. There's Apple devices and there's Android devices. Of course, there used to be Windows devices, but we're not going to talk about that. So there's two different ecosystems, but there's just a lot more to that. You know, Android, there's different manufacturers. You have Google, you have Samsung. And then of course, on both Apple and Android, you have tablets, you have bigger tablets, you have smaller tablets, you have phones, you have bigger phones, you have smaller phones. There's a lot that goes into it. And when you're making a mobile app, you have to take all of that and all of that ecosystem in mind. The next thing I learned was that there's different types of mobile development. So on one end of the spectrum, you have native development. And really this means that you're doing app development by platform. So all of your Apple devices have one set of code and all of your Android devices have another set of code. And those apps are built differently. So they might have the same features, but they also might not. You know, one app might exist and one might not exist. So that's one side of the spectrum. At the extreme, you have mobile web only. So this means that there's no app on the App Store for a customer to download. The customer will only access content through a mobile web browser. So think about it. When you are looking at the App Store, you're like, oh, cool, I want to, you know, this website's really cool. Let me look at, or this brand's really cool. Let me check the App Store to see if they have a app. You look, you don't find it, and you're kind of bummed out, but then you just access it through Safari or Google Chrome on your phone. And then you have something in between. This is hybrid development. So this allows you to utilize frameworks to build code once and have it used on web, iOS, and Android with really limited custom code. So build once, deploy everywhere. Is it that straightforward? I don't know, to be determined. There's a lot of frameworks here that talk about it. My talk is mostly going to focus on native development. So I'll leave hybrid development for another conversation. And I also learned that you get some really awesome access to cool hardware. So of course you have that VR stuff, which is really cool. You have a camera that helps support that. Because camera's a lot more than just photos. Again, that virtual reality that was talked about earlier, which is really interesting. Cameras are used for some really interesting medical use cases, figuring out what outfit or glasses you'll look at in. You have some really cool hardware that at your disposal, besides just your regular phone. Do we have any runners in this group? Or bikers? Let me pull up the chat. If anyone's, okay, I see some claps. Awesome, awesome. So we have some runners or bikers. How many people use the GPS to track their workouts? I love using GPS to track my workouts. I feel like that simplified everything. I don't have to map out my runs anymore. So mobile devices give you access to GPS. They also give you access to accelerometers. So this helps sense motion. So this will measure acceleration in X, Y, and Z planes. You get access to gyroscopes. So this detects your phone orientation. So this is responsible for all your racing games, which is really cool. You get really great access to biometric sensors. So think about like the fingerprint sensor or facial recognition sensors. You get access to a magnetometer. So this measures magnetic field. And you're probably thinking like me, what are you ever going to use a magnetic field for? Well, this is helpful in the maps and the compass apps. And then you also get access to barometers. So that's helpful for measuring air pressure and altitude. So there's a lot of really cool hardware you get access to. And of course you get Bluetooth. So I'm sure all of us love connecting to our Bluetooth devices. But with all of this access to cool hardware, you also get some resource constraints. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the screen size. So we talked about this a little bit earlier when I talked about Apple and Android and programming for different devices. There are so many different screen sizes because again, you have tablets, you have phones, you have mini tablets, you have mini phones, you have Max tablets, you have Max phones. You have, again, both iOS and Android. You have different manufacturers. There's just so many different screen sizes that you have to make sure your app can work on. And if that's not bad enough, you also have vertical versus horizontal orientation, which doesn't show up with a virtual background. But not only does your phone have to work vertically, it has to work horizontally. So there's just so much extra resource constraints that you have to deal with as you're building mobile devices. And the next one you have to deal with is limited data. So there are times where you might not have data on your mobile phone. So think about when you're at the airport and you're on airplane mode or you're on an airplane, you know, you still have, most customers and most users expect to have some kind of access to their apps and their devices while they're on a plane and airplane mode. So that's something you have to think about when you're designing an app is, does your app really need access to data? Can the user pre-download any content? How can you make it work when the user doesn't have data? And that ties into if you're just on Wi-Fi. So if your device can only connect to Wi-Fi, you're not always going to be around Wi-Fi. So same thing there. And then you also have to think about when you're only on mobile data. So if you're like me, I don't have unlimited data, right? So I have to make sure I'm watching what I'm doing on my mobile phone. So when you're programming, you have to think, does your app really need that much data? Can you watch how much you're downloading? And can you slim down some of the network requests you're making if you're on mobile data? And then of course, what happens if you enter like a dead or a drop zone? So you're going under a tunnel and your Maps app just stops working. How do you handle that? How do you handle a dropped request mid-flight? So lots of things to keep in mind there, but we're not done yet. The resource constraints continue. You also have to think about the app size limit and a phone's limited memory. So larger apps will run into issues when downloading. So if you need Wi-Fi to download, you might need Wi-Fi to download an app if it's too big. You might also have to explicitly give the customer or the user an option to download via the mobile network instead of just Wi-Fi. And then of course, your device memory size. So does your app use too much memory when running? And will your customers delete your app when they use up all their internal storage? I've definitely hit that internal storage limit several times before, and I know exactly which apps of mine I delete. I'm sure I'm not the only one. But wait, it does not stop there. So there's more resource constraints when you think about multiple users when you're sharing your phone, but also theft. I know a few colleagues of mine who have gotten their phone stolen just casually at, a fast food restaurant or at just a restaurant on the table. So theft becomes a lot different when it's a mobile phone versus if you have your desktop computer plugged in at home. All right. That was a lot of talking. So would love to open the floor again. And knowing that there's a lot of these resource constraints, I'm sure you've seen a lot of issues in the mobile apps that you use. So I would love for you to either unmute and say what's your least favorite mobile experience, or feel free to put it in the chat. Oh. And I will read it out loud. Okay. I see pausing and long delay. Yep, totally agree. I hate when, I have to cough, hold on.
I'll cut this part out of the recording, Alyssa, you're good.
Oh my, okay, I'm not used to talking for so long without water. Whew, okay, sorry everyone. All right, so yeah, pausing and long delays, battery limitations, oh my gosh, yes. Texting and autocorrect. Oh, you don't like texting and autocorrect? It's true, sometimes it can get weird. When apps suddenly crash without warning, oh, definitely. Dropping the phone and damaging it. Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, TikTok didn't have closed captions. I'm gonna sound super old school here, but I've never used TikTok before. And literally my team yesterday made fun of me for it. So that's just so funny that TikTok was brought up. Yeah, having to be online and connected to the app, totally agree. Animations, yes. Passwords that get auto-corrected. Oh, I've never seen passwords that get auto-corrected, but that seems miserable. poor UI design, security concerns. Another TikTok example, Reddit browser link to the app, and then it just takes me to the home screen. Oh yeah. Ugh, I hate when links don't work. Autocorrect. Yep. Snapchat. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing. Those are some really negative mobile experiences that I think as developers, we want to prevent. And hopefully this kind of gets us in the mindset of what we have to think about when we build this. Cool. So what was the next process in my journey? So the next thing I did was shadowing other mobile developers. So this is how I met Joni. I didn't shadow one of his teams, but some of my colleagues shadowed some of his teams. But I shadowed mobile development teams where I worked on some small bug fixes, enhancing test suites, and making some of those smaller to medium contributions to really get my bearings and learn from somebody who was more experienced. Again, I was a full stack developer and I thought I was pretty good at it too. Like I was making really large, impactful contributions. So it was kind of a mind shift to have to make smaller contributions, but that's really how I learned. So back to my cheat sheet. My recommendation here is to start small. Enhancing testing coverage like unit tests and UI tests is really helpful just from understanding how your app works in the flow. Adding UI enhancements such as like changing a font or a color or constraint updating was really helpful for me. And if you're building from scratch, you can probably take an open source mobile app and just do something like this, make these enhancements there. The best thing I did was debug and fix a bug. So it was a whole new environment and life cycle and IDE when I was doing mobile development. And you really need to get familiar with that. And you really need to get familiar with the life cycle and know your tools. So debugging a bug is the best way to do this. And I highly encourage everyone, even if it's an incredibly challenging bug, to just do it. Just try it and learn, because that's really how you learn the whole mobile life cycle. And then I built upon existing code by adding additional API calls or storing additional fields to memory. But just building upon something that was already there really helped me learn and get good before I did something larger. What else did I learn during shadowing? Well, I learned that app releases are entirely different than it's been done on web. So for me, I was used to releasing multiple times a day. On mobile, there's no such thing as that because the apps actually have to go through App Store reviews. So there's this whole layer before you can actually release to customers. But the scary part is there's also no rollback option. And the fact that once a version of an app is on a customer's phone, it stays there. The customer can choose to update their phone or update their app when a new one's available, but they can also choose not to. So I'm going to pause there because that to me just blew my mind in the sense that you could have multiple versions of the same app running around in the wild and you could do nothing about it. Nothing. So you could have a customer or a user complaining about a bug in version 1.0 and you fix it in 1.1 and they could still be complaining to you even when you have version 2 released. So super interesting and a little bit game changing for me. Awesome. So those were really key that I learned from my shadowing teams. And then I felt like, okay, I'm ready to build my own features. I feel confident. I feel like I've done things. I've built things. I've learned the nuances of mobile, and now I could build my own features from scratch. I could use limited resources. I felt much better. So kind of in summary of my whole talk, it all starts with like taking that chance and knowing you want to start something different. So hopefully for everyone on this call, it's mobile development, but maybe it's not. Learning about it and really understanding the material, getting some hands-on practice, then getting a lot of hands-on practice, and then getting even more hands-on practice, and trying to perfect it. I am by no means perfect at this at all. But I still like to practice and still try to get there. Wow, that's a lot. With that, I'm going to open the floor to questions. And I know there's a million amazing questions in the chat. So maybe we'll start there. But if you want to unmute and just ask a question, feel free to do that too. So, I got it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start at the beginning. So Leslie asked, what are some additional skills that a mobile developer should know in addition to the programming language and IDE? I would say, so in addition to the stuff we talked about now, it's probably important that you understand some version control system, however you're gonna write your code and maintain your code. But other than that, I would know like the framework. So if you're programming for Android or iOS, I would like really try to understand the frameworks that belong to them. And if you want to come off mute and ask more follow-up questions, feel free to do that.
Another thing I'd recommend strongly is understanding a good architecture, because as your app gets bigger and bigger, especially mobile, where you have to take care of views separate from the business logic, separate from your models, separate from your API access. And it's best to keep those layers understood so you put the right thing in the right place. And and other people coming along can pick up your app and figure out how to add to it.
That is such a great call out. And that's still something I'm learning. That is like one of the hardest things to keep track of. Yes. Anybody else have some perspectives? I think that's a really great topic that I think we could draw some wisdom of the crowd with. Awesome. Okay, cool. Then, okay, sorry, the chat. There's so much great content in the chat. I'm trying to weed out what's a question and what's not. How many new jobs, Mark asked, how many new jobs did you need to do each of these new roles? Oh, I did all of these at Capital One, which is really cool. So I started off in a rotational program, which is how I ended up in data engineering. And then I moved into software engineering. And then within my team, I got to kind of move around and try out different stacks, which was fun. And then again, within mobile development, Capital One put me through a reskilling program to kind of train into mobile development. So all of that I did at Capital One, which was really nice. And I don't think you needed all of those steps to go through to mobile development. That was just my journey because I get really interested in a lot of things. But you don't need you don't need a lot of those. Okay. Oh, a lot of people like to run. Awesome. I missed that at the time. That's great. Okay. Okay. What is your strategy for testing on mobile devices? So Neil asked that. Wow, that is really, really great question. And there's a few levels. So unit tests, of course, you have to do. And then besides unit tests, you should do some kind of like UI automation. So you can, Apple, you can do it through UI test. You could do it through Android, but really go through the flow and make sure the flow looks good with those UI tests. But then there's also some manual testing. So when you're like doing your app for the first time, making sure it works on a device, and then making sure you're picking the right devices to test on. So there's different size classes. We talked about, big iPhones, small tablets. There's different size classes. So our approach to testing and my approach to testing is making sure you test at least one, your feature on each device type, device class, because you're never going to be able to test every single device. So you kind of have to choose which ones you go after, and then seeing, oh, hey, our user base is mostly Samsung, or oh, hey, our user base is mostly Google Pixel. like making sure you test on those devices as well, to make sure you're providing like a good user experience there. There's so much to dive into testing, so I'm sure that probably doesn't cover enough questions. So if you want to unmute and ask more too, happy to talk through testing more as well. Or if anybody else wants to share a perspective on testing, like feel free to unmute. There's just so much that goes into it. It's probably one of the hardest things I've seen done is testing on mobile devices.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are, very religious about test-driven development. I never have been. I sort of add tests as I'm kind of got something mostly stable and sort of works the way I want. And I want to make sure I never regress from that point. So I'll add like the backstop test that says, now I know I haven't messed this up when I was adding further things. And that's been useful, but I haven't really done anything in terms of, write the test, watch it fail, now fix it. I think that's a bit overkill. I agree that for some people they need that kind of discipline, but I've never needed it.
So this is Neil. I am the one who posed the question. I'm less focused on testing methodology like TDD, more about like related to mobile. Like, do you go and buy a bunch of devices and then just load the app on there, or do you use emulators or some combination? Like what? How do you actually replicate the device classes as much as you can?
That's a great question.
Yeah, Flutter just added a bunch of stuff to be able to do not only unit tests and sort of pretend you have a screen test. So lay out the widgets, be able to ask, does this widget have this text string, for example? But they've just released in the last couple of months integration testing, where you actually can take your real device and run your test suite, and it actually runs through the whole thing on your device. And Google also has, I believe, I was Googling for it, trying to figure out where it is, a whole suite where for some Google money, obviously, you can actually say, run this on these 7 devices in this same automated way that you would have run it on your own personal device. And that's going to come in really handy as we move forward.
And I love emulators. So I'm a big proponent of like testing on emulators as much as you can, and then testing on device, because it's really cost prohibitive to have every single device. Like you won't be able to have every device. I think it would be great if you could get every device size class, but even that is cost prohibitive. So it kind of depends on, are you just building the app for yourself? Or are you part of a larger organization? But definitely relying on emulators, but you still need that test on a real device. There's some things you just can't test on an emulator, so you'll want a real device as well.
And so there's some nuances here, right? I guess the first answer is yes, you should test. The question is how much or how extensive you should test. But to answer your question, Neil, what you described is exactly how we do it. So you use emulators and simulators. On iOS, the simulators are probably going to be good enough for most use cases because, to be honest, they're just better. The emulators for Android, it's such a fragmented ecosystem. You try to target your highest number or your highest population group, right? So probably Samsung devices. And other than that, your options are buy the devices yourself, which we've definitely done before, or take advantage of a lot of the new capabilities with device farms that are out there. Google has one that Randall mentioned. AWS Device Farm is a really great capability. So, but whatever you do, Google does recommend before you release to production on any larger scale app, for sure, you should definitely do testing on real devices just because it's so fragmented. Sorry, Alyssa, go ahead.
No, that is great. That is so true, especially because I didn't know all that Android context. That was really good.
Another thing I've been testing with is to test this thing on different sizes. Yes, there's a lot of infrastructure for that, and including specifically going on one of the simulators or emulators and being able to get that. But now that Flutter can do Mac OS desktop and Windows desktop and Linux desktop, that has almost completely compatibility with the mobile devices and what they can do. and you can drag the size of the window, big and small. You can see how your responsive code actually works by just dragging the window all over the place. And you can see what it's going to do with all those sizes. Very, very slick.
That's great. Thank you. I don't want to take up too much. There are a lot of great questions in the chat, and my question has taken up already too much time, but thank you. Great feedback from everyone. Thanks.
No, Neil, that was a great question. Awesome. And Nicole asked, are there any apprenticeships or internships to break into this space? So I know some people posted in there. Yes, definitely. Leads me to my next slide of check out the open tech roles at Capital One. We have internships, we have mobile stuff, but besides just at Capital One, there are tons of resources out there. I would say like look on LinkedIn, type in internships, tech internships. Oh no. I think my screen stopped sharing. That's okay. We'll figure it out. But definitely there are some internships out there. Would definitely suggest searching on LinkedIn. But if anyone knows great places as well. Okay, sorry, technical difficulties. Awesome. What else is in the chat? What are your rules of thumb for persistence on device versus persistence in a Firebase or other remote data store? Oh, that's a really good question. I guess some things to keep in mind here. How sensitive is the data? How much data is there? Like, are you talking about like someone's preference of whether you want the username remembered, or are you talking about something of like pages and pages and pages of a book that is being read? So I think you have to think about how much data there is, if it's sensitive data. Yeah, that's kind of how I would think about it. I think small amounts of data definitely store on device if it's not sensitive.
Talking about offline earlier, AWS Data Store, I haven't personally played with it yet, but it sounds like it could be really cool. For one, you can use it just completely on your device if you want some local storage that has some queried or structured queries and things like that. I don't know if it's SQL or no SQL, I can't remember now. But the other thing I like is that you can have a hosted database as well, and you can be offline and do a bunch of stuff. And when you come back online, it synchronizes. So in the meanwhile, other people might have added, topics and posts and stuff like that, and you'll just get all that data on your local device when it wakes back up and connects. Very cool.
That is awesome. That ties back into someone's question, and I saw it somewhere, but later on, like, when do you know to play with the cool stuff and when do you know to just not and to stop? And I already know that question I don't have an answer to, but the best answer to that question is when you have a deadline. Because if you have a deadline, then you'll force yourself to stop and just get it done. Otherwise, you can just go down the rabbit hole because there's just so many cool things.
Yes.
Well, and the caveat too is if you're trying to break into the space, it can be so overwhelming, right? And web's a great example. How many JavaScript frameworks are there? Like, if you try to keep up, it's not going to happen. So I think your advice is spot on, Alyssa. Just like acquire the skill when you need it.
Which that's the next question. I saw someone post about how important is it to know Android and Xcode, and I would just focus on one. So Xcode you would use for iOS development, and I would say focus on one. Pick Android or pick iOS and just kind of learn and build something there. If you try to focus on both at once, you won't get anywhere and you'll just confuse yourself with different patterns. So that would be my thought. And I see other people said the same thing. That's good.
Maybe connect to here when we are talking about platforms. What's your opinion about multi-platform frameworks? Like React Native is very popular, or since this talk is about web and mobile, we know a framework which does cover mobile, web, and even desktop, which is Flutter. And I'm very curious, what's your take?
this is too controversial for me to answer, but Randall already mentioned Flutter, and I know Joni knows so much about Flutter, so I'm going to let them answer that question. It's a little too controversial for me to.
I'll just say this. So that's so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. We could spend a whole hour just talking about that. But if you join us on June 7th, shameless plug, Randall's actually going to be presenting on Flutter then. So you should join that one.
If I remember when I first started learning mobile, like when I was doing data engineering, I tried to use like this platform. I think it was Ionic or something. Anyway, it did not work out well, but maybe that was just me. Maybe it was user error. So, okay. What's the best way to get out of tutorial purgatory when it comes to mobile development, actually getting something done? I think we talked a little bit about this, just set that deadline. But sometimes you just got to not follow the latest trends. Does Women Who Code or any other organizations offer mentorship programs? And do you know of any programs for veterans or apprenticeships? So I don't know if Women Who Code offer mentorship programs, but I'm sure you could probably ask their organizers, and I'm sure they would connect you with a mentor. You know, feel free to reach out to me. I love talking to people and I love mentoring. And then any programs for veterans, Joni might know this a little bit more, but I know there's Code Platoon.
And I posted one in the chat for Rebecca as well. Vets Who Code is a really great organization as well. So check that out.
Awesome. Oh, wow. Okay. Are we at the end of the questions? Oh, will it be better to learn framework like Flutter? No, just kidding. Just kidding. Okay. I think we got to the end of the chat with questions. Did we miss anything? Anything folks want to talk through? Best book recommendation. Does it have to be related to mobile? Oh, yes. Oh, I don't have a best book recommendation, but here are some resources for getting started that are online. The iOS has an Apple has like a really good Swift development book that you could take a look, and it's like an online book that I thought was helpful. But to be honest with you, I think there's so much great content on the web, you probably don't need to buy a book.
I would also add that there are no books that are up to date because of the production cycle for a book is longer than almost everything is advancing in mobile space these days, particularly Flutter. Any book you see on Flutter that's in print as of 6 months ago is out of date now. Yeah, I say that as a published author, so yes, I understand the cycle.
I love that. I didn't know that. I was wondering why all of the books are really like just not up to date. And now it makes so much more sense. It's just how long the publishing life cycle is.
Yeah, generally from changing your last word in the last paragraph, you're going to change. It's about 4 months, even for an EPUB, more like 5 or 6 months if it's hard copy. And you know how far this industry goes in 6 months. It's huge.
Wow. So great thing to think about, online resources, and a lot of people are posting awesome things here. Well, if there's no other questions, I know we're at the top of the hour. I would love for you to give me feedback on this talk. I want to make sure I improve for next time. So if you have a minute, please fill this out. All the questions are optional and they're mostly multiple choice. So should be really simple, but if not, you know, it's been great chatting. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Joni, I don't know. What do you do at this point? Do we wrap up? Do we still keep talking?
This is where we make another shameless plug to hire. And so, like Alyssa mentioned earlier, so we are hiring a ton of roles right now, and that's Android, iOS, and web full stack, front end, back end, product, agile, you name it. So reach out to Alyssa or myself if you're interested. and we can give you more information and put you in touch. And we're not the only one. So this is an amazing field to be in just generally. And I think in the chat, there were a couple other folks who mentioned, reach out to them also if you're looking for opportunities in this space. But it's definitely an exciting space to be in right now because there's just so much happening. But Alyssa, thank you so much for taking the time to go through this. It was awesome.
Oh, thanks everyone for being so so vocal and interactive. Oh, this was great. I had so much fun.